So thanks again, everyone, for joining us this evening. I am honored to host this event. Je suis honoré d'animer cet événement. The longer I serve on the Foundation's board, and it hasn't been that long, the more I am impressed by this wonderful community. For 5 decades, the Foundation has been supporting and partnering with a diverse cross-section of groups across the legal, justice, education, and nonprofit sectors. We've directed over $2 billion to Legal Aid Ontario, class actions in the public interest, and thousands of diverse grants. And this investment brings tangible improvements to the day-to-day lives of thousands of people and makes substantive progress in access to justice across this province. It is so important to acknowledge our collective successes, especially during these particularly challenging times. The Guthrie Award, for which we're all gathered here today, is the Law Foundation's signature award to recognize access to justice champions. The award was created in 1996 in honor of H. Donald Guthrie, who was the Foundation's longest-serving board chair. Donald was appointed to the founding board in 1974 and served for 21 years. Guthrie Award recipients are passionate and diverse trailblazers who have forged a legacy of access to justice. And today, Bennett Jensen rightly joins this esteemed group. I'd like to now invite Adam Goldenberg to offer a few words about Bennett. Adam is a partner at McCarthy's, and he is one of the people who nominated Bennett for this award. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you, Gerald, and thank you to the Law Foundation for giving me this opportunity to say a few words about my client, one who I should say I've never had to chase for a bill, my co-counsel, my brilliant friend, Bennett Jensen. I'll start with some words that are not my own, nor indeed are they about Bennett. They're the words of applicant Doe 1, an 11-year-old Albertan. Applicant Doe 1 is one of the 5 gender-diverse young people who are challenging the constitutionality of Alberta's ban on providing gender-affirming care to minors. In her affidavit, she said, "I don't want to lose control of my body or my future. I want to be able to make my own choices for myself. I joined this lawsuit because I don't want the government to take that choice away from me." In June of this year, applicant Doe 1 and her fellow applicants, including Egale Canada, obtained an injunction from the Court of King's Bench in Alberta, which prevents that province's ban on gender-affirming care from going into force. That injunction is a product of applicant Doe 1's courage, the courage to share her story, not only in her affidavit, but under cross-examination by the Alberta government's lawyers. Still, for all her courage, and for all the courage of her fellow applicants, applicant Doe 1 would not have been before the court at all if it were not for the trust that she and her parents placed in our justice system. They trusted that they would be treated fairly and heard fully. They trusted that even in this moment of extraordinary vulnerability for trans and gender-diverse young people in Alberta and elsewhere, their families would find safety in a court of law. They gained that trust because of Bennett. Bennett spent hours with the applicants and their families, answering their questions, allaying their anxieties, explaining how their involvement, their truth, and their tenacity would make a difference. The results, at least so far, speak for themselves. To witness Bennett doing this work is humbling and a privilege. At a time when, as a trans person, let alone a trans rights lawyer, he has every right to be very, very tired, Bennett has remained tireless, ensuring that those who most need the court's protection feel supported in seeking it. And this is only the latest chapter in Bennett's career of contributions. When I first met Bennett, he had not yet joined Egale Canada. He had, however, already led efforts to reunite families separated at the Mexican border and to assist those affected by the Muslim travel ban during the first Trump administration, ensuring access to justice in the most basic and most literal sense of the term. As an advisor to the Attorney General of Canada, Bennett had stewarded a prohibition on conversion therapy through Parliament and into the criminal code. His efforts are why queer young people whose sexual and gender identities are still too often invalidated now see the truth of those identities recognized as a matter of federal criminal law. From the moment he left the government, Bennett began to build the coalition of partnerships with law firms and local LGBTQI+ groups, with advocates and organizers that he has mobilized to action in the bleakest moments of these last few years. Being part of that network, part of Bennett's team, has been one of the great honors of my professional life. I've had the privilege of a front row seat to his strategic insight, his wise judgment and unfailing empathy, and his grace under fire. I have seen firsthand his talent for using the tools available to us as lawyers, not merely to prevail in the courtroom, but more importantly, to achieve justice in and for the communities he serves. And I have witnessed, in quiet moments after hearings, the calm and careful reassurance that Bennett provides to parents of the young people for whom we fight, young people like applicant Doe 1, whose rights too many politicians are too prepared to trample. In those moments, I get to see Bennett the way those families do, as a source of inspiration, and, amid fear and uncertainty that sometimes seem intolerable, as a beacon of hope. Bennett, I know these last few years have been brutal for you, for us, for anyone who cares about the rights of L, G, B, and especially T people, and young people most of all. As we celebrate you tonight, know that we see you, we appreciate you, and we love you, not just here and now, but always. Congratulations.
Thank you so much for those inspiring words, Adam, about Bennett and his achievements. It's an honor for me on behalf of the foundation to also share some words about Bennett's life and career. And there will be some repetition, but I think Bennett's many accomplishments cannot be underscored enough. Bennett is one of the most respected human rights lawyers and leaders in Canada. He's renowned for his compelling and impassioned advocacy for the 2S LGBTQIA+ community, in particular for trans and gender diverse youth. Bennett is a member of the Ontario and the New York State bars. He began his legal career at the New York law firm Paul Weiss, where he held progressive roles leading the firm's award-winning pro bono program. He then returned to Canada, where he served as a policy advisor and later the director of litigation for the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General of Canada. And now Bennett is the director of legal at Egale Canada, a leading organization on 2SL LGBTQIA+ rights and issues. And in every role he's held, Bennett embodies humanity. Growing up, Bennett imagined being a teacher or working with youth in some way, and he did. Before law, Bennett worked in youth and family programming and low-income housing. There he saw how frustrating and unfair it could be to access resources solely based on a person's social status. He believed the law could be a powerful tool to secure the resources and the rights that all young people deserve. And so off he went to study law. Through advocacy, education, and movement building, Bennett is changing lives, and I believe it's accurate to say Bennett is saving lives. In New York, Bennett was instrumental in the firm's response, as you heard from Adam, to the family separation crisis at the US-Mexico border, leading child reunification efforts by connecting lawyers to work with detained parents. He also led work responding to the Muslim travel ban and projects to meet the needs of 2SL LGBTQIA+ people. In Canada, Bennett has been at the forefront of some of our country's most significant human rights advances for this community. At the Ministry of Justice, Bennett supported the passage of the criminal ban against conversion therapy and all associated activities. This is undoubtedly a substantial milestone in Canadian human rights history. Since joining Egale, Bennett has worked to revitalize its legal advocacy program and to respond to rising anti-2SL LGBTQIA+ discrimination and hate. Under his leadership, Egale has been counsel in and intervened in cases that confirmed the rights of gender non-conforming people in Ontario to access gender-affirming health care through the province's health insurance system, affirmed that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms does apply to school boards and the students and staff are entitled to privacy under the Charter, upheld the rights of gender-diverse students in multiple provinces to equality, safety, privacy, and self-determination, including the right to use their chosen names and pronouns at schools, and established that regulators have the authority to issue remedial orders for public statements that don't meet ethical and professional standards. For example, that healthcare practitioners can be held to account for the use of transphobic speech. Now, Bennett is a humble person, as many of you in the room know. He'll be quick to say that he did not accomplish any of this alone, and of course that's true. It is also true that he has many collaborators because he is a respected and effective coalition builder. Bennett has inspired a wave of new advocates and allies both inside and outside the legal professions. He was instrumental in mobilizing legal professionals to join Egale's Legal Issues Committee, which is an impressive group of lawyers from across the country who craft legal solutions to address policies and laws that do or could affect 2SL LGBTQIA+ people. And finally, Bennett has changed the way that the media, policymakers, and the public understand and talk about gender and sexual identities and about people's lived experiences. From podiums, panels, and podcasts, Bennett has consistently used his voice to raise awareness about the issues that are impacting the well-being of gender-diverse people. Bennett's presence and his words instill empathy, inclusion, and pride. I'll close this portion of the remarks by quoting from the words of Helen Kennedy. Helen is, of course, the executive director of Egale Canada, and she nominated Bennett for this award. And in her nomination letter, Helen said this about Bennett: "Anyone who has interacted with Bennett can see that his dedication to justice for vulnerable communities is unwavering. Through his compassionate leadership, trans and gender-diverse youth and their families know they have someone standing up for them during this exceptionally difficult period. Bennett's work is instilling optimism and fostering hope. He is a role model to trans youth and a relentless champion of their right to grow up feeling safe and accepted for who they are." And at the Law Foundation, we could not agree more. Bennett's leadership is giving people, especially young trans and gender-diverse people, their rightful power to be, as Helen said, exactly who they are. And so on behalf of the Law Foundation of Ontario, it is my absolute pleasure to present Bennett Jensen with the 2025 Guthrie Award. Bennett, would you please join me on stage?
Good evening, all, and thank you, of course, to Gerald and to Adam for their generous remarks, and to you all for being here. Gerald, thank you for your leadership at the Law Foundation, and I'd like to make an additional shout out to the fantastic team at the Law Foundation itself, who have been incredibly supportive to me leading up to tonight. Adam, you have been my friend, thought partner, lead pro bono counsel, and most importantly, as was just reinforced by the fact that I'm now standing on a stool, the tall one in our buddy comedy duo from my very first days at Egale and before. And I'm so grateful to have you in each of those roles. To say that I am honored by this recognition is a significant understatement. While I didn't have the pleasure of knowing H. Donald Guthrie QC personally, I've had the pleasure of getting to know his son Neil over the past couple of years, and I am in awe of the impact and achievements of prior recipients, including Mary Birdsell and Dean Rimbati, who are here tonight. As you have heard, the Guthrie Award was established to recognize the legacy of Donald Guthrie, specifically in the area of access to justice. Although there are many tangible ways in which I have tried to dedicate my career to this goal, my current work centers on representing the needs, interests, and realities of my own community before the justice system in a moment where trans and gender diverse people are under serious threat globally and in this country. So some of you may remember how during the first Trump administration, there was this practice at the southern US border of separating immigrant parents from their children. But one of the cruelest parts of that practice was that the government failed to keep the records of the relationship between parents and their children. So when a court eventually ordered the practice to stop and families to be reunited, it was exceedingly difficult to put those families back together. So during that period, I led working with the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, which is the organization that successfully brought the lawsuit that got that practice to stop, and the organization upon which I base a lot of my work at Egale. I partnered with the ACLU and 3 other nonprofits, and we organized and oversaw hundreds of lawyers who worked to put the families back together, focusing specifically on parents who had been removed from the country, deported from the United States with their kids left behind. The kids left behind that were separated included babies, toddlers, young children, and teens, and the trauma that they experienced will stay with them for the rest of their lives. I spent a lot of time during that period thinking about how something like this can happen, how we allow something like this to happen. And for me, it really came down to a lack of humanity. We allow ourselves, when we don't view somebody else as human, we allow ourselves to tolerate behavior and actions that we would never accept for one of our own. So I think about that a lot now in my present work. What I'm witnessing, and so many of us in the room are witnessing around the world and in Canada, is an organized and systematic attempt to strip trans people of their humanity and to cast them as a threat. When I was young, trans people were largely absent from public life, which was absolutely challenging for me. But today, after a rise in general acceptance and visibility, we are witnessing a backlash where trans people, and primarily trans young people, are being attacked by political leaders. The progress that had been achieved by many in this room is threatened and has fractured. I now regularly hear from parents and gender diverse young people about how their lives have become virtual nightmares overnight, as they have found their rights and identities dominating the headlines and public debate, with misinformation about who they are being deployed to great success. These young people, as you heard from applicant Doe 1, just want to be like everyone else. They simply want the opportunity to go to school, do extracurricular activities, and receive medical care that allows them to be and live as they are. And for senseless reasons that I won't canvass right now, it has become politically expedient to target them. About 2.5 years ago, Helen Kennedy, our executive director, brought me on as Egale's first internal director of legal in a little while. And because although Egale was founded by lawyers, after early charter successes and the achievement of marriage equality, the organization expanded to tackle the challenge of changing hearts and minds and ensuring that those legal victories actually translated into meaningful, positive lived experience for members of our communities. They did that and do that through education, research, and public advocacy. And many of my brilliant colleagues and our community partners are in the room tonight and deserve recognition. In the description of the Guthrie Award, the Law Foundation says that prior recipients saw a chance to make a difference and took it. I am lucky enough to have been given that chance by Helen, a role that allows me to put my energy and skills to work in this moment. Being able to do something is a privilege and a gift. Through my role at Egale, I'm able to show up in moments of crisis and offer hope and empowerment to some of the most vulnerable members of our society, of our country, and provide true access to our justice system. And I'm able to do so alongside dozens of lawyers who advocate for 2S LGBTQI individuals off the sides of their desk, including the tireless members of our Legal Issues Committee, past and present, our pro bono counsel, academics, and others, and members of our fantastic legal team, including my professional better half, Eric, and our new team members, Katie, Kim, and Ryden. This evening, today, or here, rather, right now, right, all of you. I'm surrounded by people who have made it possible for me to be here, personally and professionally, and that is incredibly special for me. Friends and family who have seen me through some of the lowest points in my life, lawyers who have taught me the best of our profession in terms of practicing with the highest levels of integrity and ethics, lawyers and advocates who fought to make the world safer for me and people like me when I wasn't able to, and people whom I'm lucky enough to work alongside now to try to continue in that legacy. I am so grateful to you all. I will end with one final comment and a request. First, my comment, and this particularly goes out to the lawyers in the room. It is critical that we view the attacks on trans people as the thin edge of the wedge in terms of broader attacks on the rule of law and democracy. I'm deeply informed by my time in the US and have been heartbroken watching many of the elite and powerful institutions south of the border crumble in the face of challenge under this second Trump administration. As you heard, I began my career at Paul Weiss, something that I was very proud of until recently. The firm had previously championed public interest issues that were difficult, and it championed the rule of law. The firm spent and probably continues to spend millions of dollars a year on pro bono work, and has historically spoke out on behalf of issues, on behalf of what is right and just. I feel deep shame that earlier this year, my former firm was the first to bend a knee and reach a settlement with the administration in response to an unlawful executive order attacking diversity in the profession and seeking retribution against a former partner of the firm, setting a precedent that other powerful firms then followed. We must be better than this as a legal profession. So to all of us, including the lawyers, but not just the lawyers, there will increasingly be moments where we are called upon to decide which side of history we want to be on and whether we are willing to stand up for what is right, even and especially when it is uncomfortable and inconvenient. Which brings me to my request. All of us in this room have power and influence. I ask that you take in the stakes for young trans people across the country who are now wondering whether the world will be safe for them, just as I did. Right before standing up to speak, I went to Eric and asked for the latest update from the Alberta legislature because we have been waiting, anticipating the use of the notwithstanding clause to insulate the 3 anti-trans laws that were passed last year. And if it hasn't happened while one of us has been speaking, it will happen in the coming days, we expect. And this makes what we all do and how we all react all the more important. I ask that you join me in the mission that I identified for myself almost 20 years ago of making the world better and easier for trans people in this moment of serious threat, and use your power and influence in big ways and small to help ensure that we live in a society where we are all protected by our legal system and where we can all exist as we are and belong. Thank you.